I've had quite a few people message me now and ask me to do a video on the cue action, so that is what we're going to do today. Before we get stuck into the cue action though, can I just ask that if you have enjoyed any of my videos so far, then please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon if you haven't already. That just means that you'll get notified anytime any of my videos are released. And I thank everyone that has already subscribed and everyone that is going to subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Now let's talk about the cue action, and I'm a big believer that the cue action there isn't one textbook way that you have to cue. You know, there are those old textbooks that will tell you you have to cue in a certain way to be able to play cue sports, and whilst there are some fundamentals in those textbooks that I think can really help you, I don't believe there is one right and wrong way of doing it. We've seen too many influences from multiple cue sports. I've seen too many players play with what we would call unorthodox cue actions at such a high level that I just think there are many different ways of doing it. But all I can do in this video is show you the way that I was kind of taught to cue, and some of the fundamentals that I think about with my own cue action, and hopefully that might give you some insights into your cue action. And of course my background is a snooker background, so I kind of that's where I learned to play the game and learned to cue. Okay, let's start with a grip then, and the first thing what you do, put your cue on the table and you go to pick up the cue like you pick up a hammer off a table. So you put your hand over the top of the cue like that, and you pick it up that way, so the hand is on top of the cue. Now, it looks like we're gripping it with all the fingers and the thumb, but actually we're not. What we're doing is that first finger and the thumb, that's where the pressure on the cue comes from. So that's where we're gripping it a little bit. That's where we're sort of, all the tightness or the pressure on the cue comes from. And then this second finger, it goes on just slightly less than the first one. So there is pressure on it, but it isn't the full pressure that is on the first one. Then these last two fingers, they're just there, they're loose, they're touching the cue, but there's no real pressure on it. We're not squeezing it into our hand, they're just there nice and loose, and they're just there for a little bit of support. They're not really doing much to grip the cue at all. And that just allows us to be able to cue back much better. Look, if I grab the cue solidly, so all the fingers and the thumb are squeezing on the hand in the same pressure. Look at when I go backwards, look at it stops me, it's restrictive. I can't cue back smoothly. It's really stopping my arm from being able to go back in a nice smooth fashion. Whereas if I grip with the first finger nice and firmly and then the second finger just a fraction less, these last two fingers loose, look how when I go backwards, look how much further I can go back in a nice smooth fashion. These fingers can actually come off the cue, you know, just nice and loose there, so that I can cue back as far as I need for the shot. So that is how I've always been taught to cue. Okay, let's talk about the bridge hand, the hand that actually touches the table. Now what we're trying to do with that is we're trying to create a nice stable base that doesn't move, so that when we can run the cue along it nice and smoothly. Now the way I was always taught was to place my hand on the table, just spread my fingers out a fraction, so there's a nice little separation between them, and then I'm going to squeeze my knuckles up, so the knuckles just come off the bed of the table, so that the parts that are touching the table are my fingertips and the base of my hand here, just the palm here, the base of the palm. So hand on the table, squeeze the knuckles up, and then from there, all I have to do is squeeze my thumb up to my first finger to create this V. So that V is what we can actually run the cue along. It creates a nice smooth area, and the reason we spread the fingers out the way we do is because it creates that stable base. It stops the hand from being able to move. If we have all the fingers touching and the thumb not quite up as much, look how it's a bit more wobbly. It's not as solid an area. That's why we're nice and fingers spread, knuckles just off the table, and thumb up like that, and then that is a nice stable base that is much harder to move and allows us to smoothly cue along the bridge hand. Now, that's the basics for a, say, centre ball striking shot. Well, let me bring a cue ball in, I can show you what I'm talking about. What we actually want is, because we want to keep the cue level. So when we are bridging, we look at my normal shot there. That's bridging, so that's bridging for the centre of the cue ball. If we want to play a screw shot where we're going to hit lower on the cue ball, then we actually lower the bridge. So the hand will just, now all my fingers are actually touching the bed of the table, so that I can actually get to the bottom of the table whilst keeping the cue level. And the same way with the topspin shot. So if we're going to hit higher on the white, I actually just bring my knuckles up off the table just a fraction more, so that I can actually hit higher on the cue ball, so that I'm not ever cueing down on it, I'm not ever cueing up on it, I'm always keeping the cue level, and we're cueing level with the cue ball. Now let's take a look at what we're going to do with our legs and our body. And the way I was always taught was to step into it as a right-hander, step into it and using my right leg to align myself to the shot, and that's the starting point for my stance and my base. And to do this, if we're going to hit a ball straight down the table, I'd step into it so that my object ball and my cue ball are in a line with my right leg. So if I step backwards, it allows me to step into it, and as I said, my right leg, cue ball and object ball are all in a nice line. Some people like to keep the foot absolutely in line as well, and some people will have it just splayed out a fraction, and to be honest, I chop and change a little bit depending on when I'm tinkering around with my cue action, but it doesn't really matter other than you want to try and keep it the same all the time. So we know what we're doing with our right foot, so we step into it, and then our left foot is going to come just a fraction in front of our right foot. We don't want it level, we want it to be just in front and about shoulder width apart. And then from there, we're going to bend into the shot. My right leg is going to go straight and my left leg is going to bend to allow me to get down onto the shot. So my right leg is nice and straight, left leg is bent, and that really lets me get into the shot. And for me, that's what creates a really nice and stable base, and also the fact that because I step into it and I'm all lined up from my first step into the shot, everything is nicely in line as well. So that really allows me to line up and work on my alignment. So just to recap, step backwards, and then we're going to step into it, right leg in line with the shot, left leg just in front of it, and then bend down, right leg straight, left leg bent. So we know our grip, we know our bridge, and we know what we're doing with our body and our legs, so our stance. Now what we need to do is put it together, and there's one sort of fundamental that I need to look at with what I'm doing with my cue arm. So for a right-hander, that's my right arm. So if I get myself into position, so everything else exactly as we talked about. Now what I'm looking for here with the back arm is for my arm from my elbow to my hand to be going straight down to the ground at a 90-degree angle. That gives me plenty of room to be able to cue back and through. So 90 degrees. If it's a fraction back, that's fine. There's room for that. But what I don't want to happen is people to be right the way back here with their cue, so that they've got no room to move. If the cue is going right back to start with, you've got no way of cueing. Whereas if you've got a nice 90-degree, there's so much more room to be able to cue nice and smoothly back and through. So that's what I'm looking for with my back arm, is that 90 degrees down to the ground gives me all the room I need to be able to cue smoothly. So we've talked about all the individual elements, what we're trying to do. Now we need to bring it together into a shot and sort of get the rhythm of the shot right. And I'm also going to highlight one of the big faults that I have in my cue action and something that you need to avoid in yours. So if we get down on this shot, everything as we talked about, and then it's about the rhythm of the feathering up. So we're feathering just to feel, the feathering is there to sort of feel the shot. It's just preparing ourselves mentally for the shot. We're just feeling it, and then when we're ready, we go back for one final backswing, a little pause, and that allows us to then cue through the ball normally. The reason I mentioned the big fault, one of the things I have, and it's all connected to this cueing action, this rhythm here, is I allow my shoulder to get involved, and my shoulder can drop on the shot. So what I end up doing, and it's one of the things I have to really guard against if I get down onto the shot, is I allow my shoulder to get involved in it. And you see how the cue now is going, and I'm overemphasizing this to try and show you, but it allows the cue is now going up and down. It's not going level, and we want to keep the cue as level as possible. We want the arm to move like that. We do not want the shoulder to get involved at all. So keep the arm moving nice and smooth, little pause and through. Let me try and demonstrate here. One of the biggest questions I get asked with the cue action is actually to do with your eyes. It's which ball are you looking at when you're playing the shot? And in truth, I'm actually looking at both, but at the moment of impact, I'm looking at the object ball. And the reason I say both is so when I'm feathering up for the ball, when I get down on the shot and I'm feathering up, I flick between the cue ball and the object ball, cue ball, object ball, just making sure I'm lined up absolutely as I should be. I'm going to hit the cue ball where I want to, I'm going to hit the object ball where I want to. And then at the moment I hit the object ball, so I'll go back for my final backswing, that's when I'll flick up to the object ball with my eyes, and I'm focused on the point on the object ball I want to hit, and then I hit cue through it. So I could talk you through it whilst I play this shot. I get down on the shot, I'm looking at the cue ball, and then I flick up, and then as I'm feathering, I'm sort of flicking between them both, and then as I go back for my final swing, I stay on the object ball, and then I go through. So that's the cue action as I see it. That was the way I was taught when I was younger. It's the way I've always tried to do it and try to deal with the cue action. If you don't cue like this, then don't worry. I've seen too many great players playing in a variety of different games, not just this game, but snooker and nine ball and Chinese pool. There's variations of cue sports, and people do it in a variety of different ways, and they play to an extremely high level. So there is no right and wrong way. These are just the fundamentals as I see it, and some of the things I look for in my own cue action. So if you don't cue this way, don't worry, you can still play great. But if you want to look at your cue action and you want to see if there's anything you can improve, then compare what you do to the sort of fundamentals of what I'm doing to see if that can help your game. I'd love to hear from you all as well. Do you agree with what I've talked about here? Has any of this related to what you're doing? Has it helped you improve your cueing? So comment below. I'd love to hear from you all. And of course, if you've enjoyed the video, then please hit that subscribe button and the bell next to it, and I'll catch you next time.